just to take, we'll say, fertiliser prices as they would be at the moment, or, sort of typical prices that farmers would be buying NP and K with, and to compare that with pig slurry at 4% dry matter. 1,000 gallons of pig slurry would be worth somewhere in the region of between 30 and 35 euros per 1,000 gallons. But you must also then work in the cost of spreading that slurry, and maybe if haulage comes into play, and there are other factors that people should consider.
Hello and welcome to The Pig Edge, your Teagasc Pig podcast with me, Emer McCrum, bringing you all the latest news, information and advice to keep Irish pig farmers up to date. This month, we are featuring highlights from a recent episode of the Tillage Edge podcast, focusing on the benefits of using pig slurry as an alternative to chemical fertilisers in tillage farming. Pig production is one of the main consumers of Irish cereals, and the resulting slurry produced on units can be an important source of nutrients for tillage crops. Opportunities for greater cooperation between the two sectors, from diversifying cereal production to increased use of pig slurry on crops, can lead to a stronger biocircular economy with resultant economic benefits for both parties. In this episode, host and head of the Teagasc Crops Knowledge Transfer Department, Michael Hennessy, was joined by Tillage Specialist Ciaran Collins and our own Specialised Advisor, Michael McKeon, to discuss the various management considerations of utilising pig slurry on tillage farms. Michael first asked Ciaran how well suited pig slurry is to tillage farming.
It is really. I suppose in the sense of, a typical analysis, and we'll maybe tease this out a little bit later in the podcast, is at 4% dry matter. And that's important to, that we do have a good estimate of what the dry matter is. But at 4% dry matter, in old money, 1,000 gallons is worth 19,720, or the equivalent of a bag of 19,720. So in terms of a balance, you are like with the phosphorus, that 720 is a sort of, a 3-to-1 ratio there, which is quite suitable for tillage crops. It is quite high in nitrogen, but we have to make sure that we manage to maximize, I suppose, the amount of nitrogen that we get from every 1,000 gallons we apply.
Michael McKeon, can I bring you in there just at the minute? I mean, there's pig farmers had, obviously their stock is in all the time, but are they generally eager to empty their slurry tanks at this time of the year, or is it pretty much an ongoing kind of thing?
Yep. First of all, before I come to that, Michael, thanks very much for the invite to come on the podcast. I certainly wouldn't be an expert on the tillage side of things, but I would have spent many a summer driving a far combine harvester, so I have some understanding of the challenges, I suppose, in the tillage sector. Yeah, the pig production, unlike say cattle, is 52 weeks of the year. So there's pigs are born every week, there's pigs are sold every week. There's always the same level of stock on a pig farm, week in, week out for the 52 weeks of the year. So as a result of that, the amount of slurry being produced every week is exactly the same every single week of the year, including Christmas week. So there's no, I suppose, optimum time from a pig producer's point of view of moving slurry. They would like to move it on a constant basis. But obviously from a tillage point of view, there are certain times of the year that you're going to be looking for it more than as the other times of the year.
Ciaran, just to bring you back, you mentioned there a little bit around the nutrient value of pig slurry, but what's that worth, I suppose, in terms of a monetary kind of a value in comparison to a chemical fertilizer?
I suppose firstly, it obviously depends on the value or the cost of chemical fertilizer at the given point in time, and then obviously it depends on the nutrient content of the slurry. But just to take, we'll say, fertilizer prices as they would be at the moment, or sort of typical prices that farmers would be buying NP and K with, and to compare that with pig slurry at 4% dry matter, 1,000 gallons of pig slurry would be worth somewhere in the region of between 30 and 35 euros per 1,000 gallons. So that's the value of the slurry, per 1,000 gallons. But you must also then work in the cost of spreading that slurry, and maybe if haulage comes into play, and there are other factors that people should consider. So, that'd be its value at current, we'll say, fertilizer prices.
And in terms of targeting that pig slurry, Ciaran, is that where should a farmer kind of go with it first on a tillage farm?
Ideally, targeting low index P and K sites is really the best way to approach it, because to do that with chemical fertilizer is really expensive, and I think pig slurry is ideal in that scenario. If you've index 1 or index 2, and to use that pig slurry for build-up, I think that's a very productive way of using pig slurry, and then you can top up with your chemical fertilizer as well. That being said, you can certainly grow a crop with just using pig slurry on its own and topping up with some nitrogen, and plenty of farmers are doing that. But, if you're new to pig slurry, I think targeting those low index sites, or, crops with high demand, is certainly a good way to doing it. And then I suppose the other part of it is we need to maximize the nutrient recovery. So P and K is generally a little bit easier, but certainly the nitrogen aspect of that, it's targeting as near to growth as possible, to minimize those losses.
Okay. And is there a need to plough in or incorporate that slurry, Ciaran?
Yeah, it's certainly to limit volatilization. That would be the target. Really would be to incorporate between 3 and 6 hours, and that's how we maximize the nitrogen recovery. And there is some work going on, and there are some farmers doing it now. And I suppose the weather at the moment is actually perfect for in-crop application. And some growers with winter cereals are taking the opportunity of dry conditions at the moment, and they're applying pig slurry in crop, again using a dribble bar system. So again, that sort of limits the amount of volatilization that's happening there, and we're just maximizing recovery of that nitrogen.
And Michael, Ciaran is talking a bit there around the nutrient value of the pig slurries, but can that vary depending on the type of house it's after coming out of? In other words, if it's after coming out of say the fattening house versus out of where the sows are held, is it different along the way?
As you said, Michael, the dry matter of pig slurry is 4% in the nutrient analysis on the paper value of it, but it can vary slightly depending on the age of the pig. So if you have coming from sows, it might be slightly lower. It might be 3.5%. If you have it coming from, say, the finisher unit there, it might be 4.5%, or even 5%. So it will vary slightly, but probably the biggest thing on it is to make sure that the slurry has been it's been mixed, or it's been agitated before it actually comes onto the tillage farm, to make sure that there's no crust, to make sure that what you're getting then, if the tank has been it's been agitated, that you're getting a consistent amount of nutrients, so you're not getting highs and lows. And that's really where, as a tillage farmer, you just want consistency. So if it's 3.5% or 4% or 4.5%, you want it consistent. This is 4.5%, and that's what I'm getting. So at least when you know that consistency, you can plan around that then from a nutrient, the nutrients for the crop.
I was talking, Michael, to a farmer recently who was taking pig slurry, and I can't remember whether it was on the farmer's farm himself, or it was on the pig's farm, on the piggery, where there was almost like a reception tank where all the material was pumped in, and it was kind of agitated fairly well in there, and it seemed to be a very consistent way of, or a very good way of getting that consistent material.
Yeah, certainly. If the unit has that, you wouldn't. Yeah, it'll depend from unit to unit whether they have that tank or not. What we would be recommending, though, is that it is agitated before it actually goes out on to tillage farms or onto any farm, because you're getting a much better mix of it there. As I said, and really you're looking at the likes of using a hydrometer. So hydrometer there, as you're aware, if you just put it into the slurry, and it will give you a reading as it bobs up and down. It'll give you a reading as to what the dry matter content of the slurry is. So once it's agitated, we would recommend that the pig producer has one and the tillage producer has one, just from a quality control point of view, that everybody is happy that this is at 4% of a dry matter, that they can just plan around it. And that's where, if from the pig sector point of view, or the pig producer's point of view, if he's agitating the tank when he has it well mixed up, he can take a sample off it there and say, yep, that's 4%. He can go and take a sample from the other end of the tank where it's agitated the other side and take it, and it's still 4%. And he's happy enough then that the quality of the slurry being pumped from that tank is, whether it be 50, 100, 200,000 gallons from that tank, is of the same consistency.
Okay. And Michael, some of the pig farms are often located a bit of a distance away from tillage ground. How are those logistics organized, I suppose, to try and get that slurries to where it's actually needed?
Yeah, so generally, in fairness to the pig producers, I suppose they are very used to logistics of having trucks on the road because from a feed point of view, they're well used to organizing trucks from a feed point of view or for whey or for stuff like that. So it's no real different than organizing the trucks then for pig slurry. So they can deliver it for pig slurry. It's the one thing they probably do need is just that if somebody's looking for pig slurry, to be able to plan in advance and say, right, I'm going to look for this amount of pig slurry. So therefore, from a pig producer's point of view, he needs to know that there's, right, I'm going to need 4 or 5 trucks on the road there next week to go to this particular farm if it's umbilical spreading at the time or something like that. So it's just giving a bit of a heads up. And that really comes back to having a relationship with the pig producer and the tillage grower, so that over time, they learn to work much better with each other, and it's a win-win for both sides. But generally, I would say most of the pig producers would have no problem trying to organize the logistics side of things to move the slurry.
And then the other side of that, Michael, there's a bit of paperwork and forms involved in that. How does that work?
If the pig producer is doing an export, then he will put up the export on the department, the Ag Food account, and then the grower will get a text message saying, does he wish to accept this export? So that's not a huge issue on either side. The pig producers are well used to putting that up in the system. They have a system in place for the units as they're exporting it in conjunction with the contractors. So all of that is very straightforward, and it's simply the tillage producer just has to accept that, and that's done based on he has the nutrient plan done beforehand, so he knows the amount of slurry that he's looking to take in, and he's able to say that to the pig producer and say, look, I'm looking for X amount of slurry, and there's no issue from that. Like, that's a very
very straightforward,
seamless way of doing it. Yeah.
Okay. And Ciaran, I did want to talk to you just a little bit around that NNP part that Michael mentioned there a second ago. How important is it that a tillage farmer would have that in place before sourcing any of these big slurries? Any slurries?
Yeah, look, firstly, I suppose, look, from a legislative perspective, we have limits and we need to comply with that. And look, the only way you can do that is having a nutrient management plan on the farm. So that's the starting point. And I think then, you factor in then how much that you can take and based on your crops and your expected yield. So that's the starting point. I think the other thing it's very important as well is like to adjust the fertilizer program to take account of the organic manures that you use, just so that you can avail of the cost savings, because sometimes, if crop nutrients can be supplied in excess, and then we don't reap the benefits of using them as well. So I suppose that's NNP is, I suppose, really the key part of the whole thing, really, just to make sure that you're obviously complying with all the rules firstly, but then that you're getting the savings as well,
So there you have it. That's all from this episode of The Pig Edge. And it's clear that incorporating organic manure into rotational cropping systems has many benefits. From improvements in soil structure, health and biological properties, increased soil organic matter and trafficability, in addition to replacing some of the N, P and K requirements of the crop, such benefits can all be realised while lowering the chemical fertiliser spend and reducing carbon emissions associated with chemical nitrogen. The Teagasc Pig and Tillage departments have been working more closely in recent years to improve the connectivity between pig and tillage farmers. A recent highlight of this collaboration was the very successful event held in conjunction with the Signpost Tillage programme on Matty and Miriam Moore's farm in County Offaly, which focused on replacing chemical fertiliser by applying pig slurry to standing winter crops using an umbilical system. Other ongoing initiatives in this area include an updated infographic on the use of pig slurry on tillage ground, which was distributed at the recent series of Teagasc winter crop walks and will be used at future tillage discussion groups and farm walks, in addition to signpost farm meetings. Our booklet on pig slurry, which will be familiar to some listeners, is currently being revised with a tillage focus to provide a useful resource for tillage farmers and advisors alike. We also have videos and newsletter articles planned in conjunction with our colleagues in the Tillage department on promoting the use of pig slurry on tillage ground, plus exploring the viability and logistical operation of slurry storage tanks on tillage farms. Don't forget to join us again next month for more news, information and advice from the Teagasc Pig Edge podcast. I'm Emer McCrum, and thanks for listening.